Hey, this is Apestyles recording segment 3 of my 200 rebuy win for Card Runners. So, in the following hand, I raise kings to 2.2x under the gun +1, and am called by under the gun +2. So we bet, I guess a standard bet, 55% of the pot or so, and Leo Stefan raises. Regarding his raise, firstly, most players wouldn't have too much of a raising range in this spot. However, even though we have a small sample size on Leo Stefan, he's called 2 of 3 hands, not including this one. So that would suggest that the villain has a wider flatting range, and also a wider flatting range than is optimal, which would then suggest that he is not a big winning regular. So because of that, he may be wider when he raises like this. He could also be bluffing a bit as well. At this point in the tournament, I'm not really looking for too many excuses to fold kings with a 3.5 stack to pot ratio. However, a couple arguments for calling is if this player is in fact flatting wide. He has 6s and 5s and 3s as well, and probably is 3-betting jacks and queens and maybe even 10s. So it's tough to say. I think that the majority of players would either call or shove. I tend to call in these sorts of spots on dry boards or dry-ish boards, because I'd like to give my opponent the opportunity to keep bluffing. And as my buddy Bet You Don't Bet says, when I have a good hand, I don't like to let them fold. Now on this turn, my plan was to call any turn. However, on this turn, I believe that his 8-9 suited semi-bluffs get there, his fours get there. If he happened to have like a 6-7 suited, which would be a strange hand to raise, that got there as well. And also, even his hands that I beat, like 8s and 9s, have additional outs. So I could definitely see an argument for folding, but it was a Sunday, end of the day, and wasn't really trying to fold kings at this point in time. Although I can see some reasons for doing so, for sure. So I called, and he had aces, but I run really good. Let's back it up a little bit and not even talk about how I played this hand. Let's talk about how you would play your range as Leo Stefan, as under the gun +2 versus under the gun +1, or essentially how you would play an EP versus EP. I think versus an aggressive player like myself, who is raising between 18 and 20% of hands, I think that you can 3-bet your entire range. And I think what I would recommend is 3-betting for value something like 8s plus, ace-jack suited, ace-queen offsuit, so about 6% of hands. And as a bluff, I would recommend 3-betting a range that looked a little bit like... So the following is a hypothetical 3-bet bluffing range, EP versus EP with 26 big blinds effective. You might even want to take some of these out, especially versus a tight player. But I think this is good. Essentially, it focuses around the idea of 3-betting hands that are slightly too weak to call with. And then the 3-bet for value range would look arguably, not like that, like that, so about 6% of hands. And that would be versus a loose aggressive player who was capable of 4-betting light. And remember that if somebody's opening 20% of hands, it's going to be very difficult for them to play their range in such a way where you can't 3-bet call 8s plus, ace-jack suited, and ace-queen offsuit, simply because they're either calling or folding, and there's quite a bit of value to them folding as well. And you're going to have enough equity to 3-bet call if they do 4-bet. So I think it's arguable. Maybe you could move it up to nines and ace queen suited, but I think this range is relatively reasonable versus a loose aggressive player.